Hi class, so for the continuation of our discussion about developing of a business plan, so we're going to tackle now the major sections of the business plan. So these are the major sections of the business plan. We have introductory page, executive summary, environmental and industry analysis, description of the business, production plan, operations plan, marketing plan, organizational plan, financial plan, assessment of risk, timetable or milestones, and the appendices. So first one, we have the introductory page. So this is the cover page that provides a brief summary of the business plan's content. So it must contain the following: the name and address of the company or the business, the name of the entrepreneur and his contact information. So, including sa information niya is the telephone number, the email address, if merong personal website, and then a brief description of the company and the nature of the business and the amount financing need. So the entrepreneur might also want to include a statement of confidentiality, especially if his business idea involves a novel or cutting-edge technology. Next one is executive summary. So you can see here the highlights of the business plan summarized in 2 or 3 pages. The executive summary, which is prepared after the total plan has been written, it must stimulate the interest of its readers, especially if he or she is a potential investor. So, if it is written in a concise and compelling manner, the business plan might just convince the potential investor that the entire business plan is worth reading. So, ano ba yung mga key questions that the business plan must answer include the following. So, what is the basic idea for the new product or service? What makes it unique? How will the idea for this proposed venture be realized? Is the potential market big enough to make the business viable? How many revenue and income is a business expected to generate? Who are the people behind the business? Do they have the knowledge, skills, and experience required to develop the product or service idea and to run the proposed venture? So, the entrepreneur must use his judgment in determining which pieces of information ought to be included in the executive summary. So, for example, if there's a large of untapped market that the business can readily exploit, then this must definitely be highlighted. Next is the environmental and industry analysis. So it is important to describe the general conditions within which the entrepreneurial venture will operate. So the environmental factors includes the sociocultural, technological, economic, and political-legal conditions. So ano-ano ba tong mga conditions na to? Let's start with the sociocultural condition. So it includes a description of shifts in the characteristics of the population or in demographics. So includes the rise of the Filipino middle class and the growing elderly population. Also yung lifestyle trends, including increasing emphasis on health and sustainable living. So, especially ngayon na nasa pandemic tayo, so talagang nagfo-focus sila sa emphasis sa health. Also, yung shifting ng consumer preferences, including the demand for green products and services. So, yun yung under sa socio-cultural conditions. So, ano naman yung sa technological? So, other technological conditions, so it includes assessment of the major development in science and technology that might have either a beneficial or detrimental impact on the business or the entire industry. So, for example, there is an advances in information and communication technology. And then it give rise to e-commerce. So which has greatly influenced a variety of industries, so such as yung wholesale and retail, tourism, banking, and telecommunication. So, 'di ba dahil yung sa mga technological conditions, talagang nagkakaroon ng influence sa kung paano magbenta ng mga wholesale or retail or kung paano na tayo mag-online banking, 'di ba? And also with the telecommunications. So, yun yung under ng technological conditions. So, ano naman yung economic conditions? This must include a description of the growth of both the national and local economies. So, it is measured by the gross domestic product or the GDP and the regional GDP respectively. The price movements of key business inputs, so yung inflation rates, interest rates, foreign exchange rates, employment trends, and disposable income among others. So, ito yung under ng economic conditions. Next is yung political-legal conditions. So, this must take into account existing laws and regulations, as well as future legislations that could directly affect the business. So, a legislated increase in minimum wage, for instance, would have a substantial impact on the labor-intensive business employing low-wage workers. So, example nito, kapag nagkaroon ng future na pagtaas pa sa mga minimum wage. So, every now and then, nagkakaroon talaga ng increase sa minimum wage dahil na din sa pangangailangan ng mga tao. So, ito yung mga political legal conditions. So, meron pa tayong example na merong stricter health and safety regulations. So, it might increase the cost of production if there will be required changes in manufacturing process or in the packaging of the products. So, dahil kasama dito sa political legal yung mga stricter health and safety, so additional cost siya sa company. And then, yung cost tuloy ng product is mas tataas. So, on the brighter side, there might be tax exemptions, incentives, or subsidies that businesses can avail or if they fall under the government's list or priority industries. So, minsan naman, meron naman mga tax exemptions or incentives na binibigay si government sa mga businesses. Like for example, tumaas yung amount of income na kapag ganito yung certain na amount of income na natanggap mo, so zero interest, 0% yung tax rate mo pa. So, that's the example. And then, there are even laws that provide for low interest loans and other forms of support for micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises. Yung mga nabanggit nating factors na yan, so it is beyond the control of the business. So let's be aware of those factors. And however, it will allow a business to spot opportunities that can be exploited and threats that it can guard against. So, once a general picture of the general environment has been painted, it is time to look into the specific industry conditions, including the competitive landscape. So this will be valuable when the entrepreneur formulates his business strategy. For the conditions of the specific environment, we have the supply and demand conditions and competition. So, ano ba yung supply and demand? So, for the entrepreneur, it is important to know whether his proposed business ventures belongs to an industry that is rapidly growing. So, ang tawag dun sa mga rapidly growing is sunrise industry. So, o kaya steadily growing, plateauing, or rapidly declining. So, sunod-sunod siya, yung rapidly na-grow, and then yung steady lang na-grow, and then plateauing, so parang pahina siya ng pahina, and then yung rapidly declining, or yung sunset industry naman. Dito sa supply and demand conditions, pumapasok yung mga tanong na if nag-grow ba yung sales mo over the past 5 years? Are there prospects for further growth or saturated na ba yung market? If the entrepreneur follows the bandwagon, is he doomed to suffer the classic lechon manok syndrome or the most recent Uber syndrome? So, yung kasing lechon manok syndrome is yung mga thousands of entrepreneurs jump into what they perceive to be easy money bandwagon. So, yan yun sa lechon manok syndrome. And then yung sa Uber syndrome naman, ano yan? So, it refers to the company that has achieved spectacular rapid entrepreneurial success but is in the tipping point of equally spectacular and rapid entrepreneurial failure. So, mabilis yung pag-angat and mabilis din yung pagbaba. Under competition naman, so some entrepreneurs might be led to believe that a good product or service is enough to sustain a profitable business. However, there is always the threat of a large competitor who has the resources to come up with a similar or even better product at a much lower price. So it is therefore essential for the entrepreneur to know the enemy. So, meaning, the products and services that they offer, so, kung aalamin mo yon, so, kung sino-sino yung mga major customers nila, aalamin mo din yung mga strengths and weaknesses nila, so that he can execute an appropriate competitive strategy. 'Di ba? Parang know your enemy nga. So, perhaps the entrepreneur can focus on a specific market and then yun yung magiging major player na hindi siya mababother na itap and therefore enable him to operate in a less cutthroat environment. So dahil nga meron tayong fear na baka merong mas okay ay um, mas magandang product at saka mas mura. So, yung competitor natin yun, for sure, makukuha nyo yung target market din natin. So, it is a very important na alamin din natin kung ano yung mga strengths and weaknesses nila, kung sino ba talaga yung typical audience nila or typical customers nila. And then, from there, makakagawa tayo ng specific plan or market niche kung saan o parang dito tayo lilinya para at least meron pa rin tayong siguradong sales. So, ganun yun. So, di ba nga, don't forget, you must really know your enemy. Next major section natin is description of the business. So, it is worth including na isama natin dito yung mission statement natin which could serve as guide in decision making. So, kung para saan ba talaga yung business natin and kung ano yung mission natin. The entrepreneur must also include information about the product or services offered by the company and also the location of the business, its major physical assets, and some background information about the business owner and its management team. With regards naman to the location of the business, so it might be important to indicate whether the office or plant is in commercial zone, is it accessible to traffic, so is the space big enough for potential expansion, and other more questions pa like will the building be bought or leased? So kung bibilhin mo ba talaga yung mismong place mo or magre-renta ka lang? So ano yung mga terms ng lease? So kung yung building ba na tatayuan mo ng business is new or old. So, does it require renovation? So, ano yung mga equipment din na kakailanganin mo para sa business? So, kung yung mga equipment na ba yun is bibilhin mo or rerentahan mo. So, yung mga ganun. So, parang yung buong description mo nung business. Under production plan, so if yung new venture is a manufacturing concern, the entrepreneur must prepare a production plan that describes the complete manufacturing process. So, if the manufacturing will be carried out by the business, the entrepreneur must include the following production plan. So, yung description ng layout of the physical plant, yung machinery and equipment needed to perform the manufacturing operations. So, yung name nun, address, terms ng payment of the suppliers of raw materials, yung production cost, yung future capital equipment needs. So, if the manufacturing process will be fully or partially subcontracted, the production plan must describe the subcontractor, including the location of the subcontractor's facilities, indicate the reason for selecting the subcontractor, and spell out the cost of subcontracting. So these are all important for potential lenders or investors to assess the financing needs of the business. So ito yun kapag um, manufacturing process or manufacturing yung naisip mong business ng business venture mo. So kapag ikaw yung mismo magma-manufacture, so kailangan yung complete process, pati yung mga equipment, ganyan, kailangan mo ilagay. But if hindi naman ikaw yung fully magma-manufacture, so meron kang subcontractor na tinatawag, so yung mga subcontractor na kasi yan, meron silang ginagawa para sa'yo. So, ganun. So, it is important din na alam mo din yung kung ano yung mga facilities nila or kung saan sila nakalocate and ano yung reason mo kung bakit mas pinili mo mag-subcon kaysa ikaw yung fully maggawa. So, something like that. So, kaya siya naman talaga super important is kailangan siya makita nung mga potential lenders and investors dun sa business plan mo para alam nila if kakailangan mo ba ng mas malaking financial na capital um, or yung mismong invested capital. Next is operations plan. So the operations plan must be included whether the business is concerned with manufacturing or service. So for manufacturing businesses, this section must describe the flow of goods and services from production to the customer, including pag-purchase mo ng mga raw materials, um, inventory din ng raw materials, and yung finished goods na. So, kung ano-ano yung mga inventory control procedures mo and kung paano ka nakakapag-distribute. While sa service businesses naman, this section, tong operations plan, must describe the procedures in completing a business transaction. So, then for retail business naman, for example, you must explain how it will purchase the various products it will offer, how it will manage the inventory, and how it will keep track of sales. So, for example, naisip mo is retail business. So, kunyari, magbebenta ka ng ano ba, beauty products. So, saan mo kukuhanin itong mga products na to, kung paano mo gagawin yung pag inventory kung paano mo mata-track yung sales mo. And then, if the business also sells online, how will its website be designed? How will customers choose from its product offerings? How will they pay for their purchases? And how will the merchandise be delivered to them? So, dito papasok yung kung paano ba talaga i-operate yung business na gagawin mo. So, yung mga businesses mo, so it can either be manufacturing, service, or yung retail. Next one is yung marketing plan. So, this section describes the target market for the new product or service. So, kung sino-sino yung mga bibili ng products mo or kung sino yung mag-a-avail ng service. So, why would they want to do so? So, once na meron kang defined na target market, the entrepreneur must also describe how the product or service will be priced, promoted, and distributed to its target customers. So, if the entrepreneur conducted market research, then highlights of the study, so including no new information about competing products, must be presented to justify marketing strategies. So also in addition, yung forecasted sales must be included in this section to provide an indication of the viability of the business. This forecast, however, will only be believable if the assumptions about the potential market are reasonable. So coming up with a detailed marketing plan will assure potential investors that the entrepreneur has carefully analyzed the potential market for the product and has obtained compelling evidence that the target customers will actually buy the product when it becomes available. So, ito naman yung mismong pagmamarket mo na nung products mo or service mo in the kung dun sa mismong target market mo. So, dapat din is believable siya. So, ilalagay din kasi natin dito yung mga sales forecast natin eh, no? So, syempre, hindi naman para makapag-attract pa ng mga investor, ganyan. So, ilalagay mo doon, mataas na sales forecast, wherein hindi naman talaga siya feasible. So, kailangan talaga, ang ilalagay mo lang is yung naaayon doon sa target market mo. So, under organizational plan, we have here the forms of ownership. So, will it be proprietorship, partnership, or corporation? And then, it is also important na ilagay natin yung organizational chart and then kung ano ba yung mismong job descriptions. And also, hindi lang naman yun yung importante. So, it is also very important that the potential investors, that they must be convinced that the individuals who will run this venture collectively have the competence, yung character, experience, and expertise needed to ensure a successful business outcome. So, do the members of the management team have complementary skills and abilities? Um, Maayos bang nailagay yung mga roles and responsibilities nila according to their individual strengths? So, have they developed a good working relationship? So, dyan pumapasok yung sa organizational plan. And also, how about young group of entrepreneurs who lack experience? So, if natanong nyo, syempre, like for you guys, na mga bagong grupo na possible na maging entrepreneurs, so paano yon? For potential investors, this could be offset by bringing in business managers or consultants who could use in running the business. It might help if the founding owners could highlight their academic background and relevant training, as well as show that they have solid cognitive and social skills. So it does not hurt if the entrepreneurs exhibit energy and passion when they actually meet the potential investors. So, kailangan makita ng mga potential investors na gusto mo talaga or andun yung passion mo dun sa business na gagawin mo. While every section of the business plan is important, one section that is likely to receive close scrutiny is the financial plan. This section determines the investment that must be poured into the business and indicates whether the business is an economically viable undertaking. So, first one, the financial plan must provide a summary of the assets of the business. So, kung ano yung mga possible na bilhin niya or yung mga projected na liabilities. So, ano din yung mga expected na potential retained earnings or yung mga investment ng entrepreneur. So, such information is summarized in a pro forma balance sheet, which shows projections of the company's financial conditions at various times in the future. The projected balance sheets will enable lenders and investors to determine whether debt to equity ratios, working capital, and other financial ratios are within acceptable limits and will justify initial and future funding for the company. So, dito na papasok yung natutunan natin previously sa accounting. So, you need to have a pro forma balance sheet, and also yung mga pag-a-analyze ng debt to equity ratio. So, 'di ba napag-aralan din natin 'to. So, dito siya papasok. And the financial plan must summarize the projected sales, the cost of goods sold, and the general and administrative expenses for the first 3 years. So, such information, including the computed net income after taxes, is shown in a pro forma income statement. So, gagawa din kayo ng pro forma income statement. Finally, the financial plan must include a cash flow statement, which shows the amount and timing of expected inflows and outflows of cash over a period of several years. Cash flow projections for the first years are usually provided monthly to ensure that the business will have sufficient working capital to sustain operations. So, assuming yung sales might be irregular during the early stage of the business, so normal naman yon, thus resulting in limited cash inflow. The entrepreneur might have to borrow money to cover fixed monthly expenses such as salaries and utilities. So, pag nagawa na kayo ng business plan, kailangan nyo din gumawa nito, cash flow. So, yung pro forma balance sheet, income statement, and yung cash flow. And also yung mga analysis. Next section is assessment of risk. Effective business plans must contain a section that discusses the risks that might prevent the business from achieving its objectives. So, among these risks are the following. So, yung price cutting by competitors. So, yan yung mas mababa yung price ng competitors sa atin. Operating costs that exceed initial estimates. So, di ba meron tayong pro forma or yung mga estimate natin. And then, yung operating cost daw natin is mas tumaas. So, pwede ding failure to achieve sales forecast. And then, sudden unavailability or a steep increase in the price of raw materials. So, yung mga kailangan natin para makapag-produce ng product daw natin is biglang tumaas yung amount. So, magbabago yung pricing natin. So, it will be a big effect dun sa business natin. Difficulties in raising additional capital. Advances in technology that might render the new product obsolete. So, for example, merong bagong technology na parang hindi na magiging useful yung product na ino-offer mo. Unforeseen environmental conditions, such as a natural disaster or a major recession, like what's happening now, and unfavorable legislation. So, yan yung mga risks. So, one these risks are identified, there must be a discussion on what strategies will be employed to prevent on minimizing those risks and to respond to those risks na pwedeng mangyari. So, dito, ilalagay nyo yung mga potential risk and then, yung strategy, kung paano ma-prevent yon and kung paano ma-minimize and how would you respond if nangyari na talaga yung risk ngayon. Next major section is timetable or milestones. For both entrepreneur and the potential investor, knowing when major activities will happen and when milestones will be reached serves a useful purpose. So, among the key milestones are the following. So, yung formal registration of the business. So, yan yung sa Department of Trade and Industry. And then, the completion of product or service design. So, yung itsura ng product mo or kung ano yung design, ganyan. And completion of prototypes. So, yung mga sample ng mga ibebenta mo or ipoproduce mo. Hiring of initial personnel, agreements with suppliers and distributors, actual production, and receipt of initial orders, and initial sales and deliveries. So, yan yung mga timetable or milestone na tinitignan ng entrepreneur and potential investors. And the last section is the appendices. So, to ensure that the main body of the business plan is concise enough to include only the most essential information, several items could instead be appended to the document. So, these items typically include the market research data, the detailed financial projections, the full resumes of the business founders and members of the top management team, and even the profile of key competitors. So, by placing these items as appendices, the entrepreneur provides information that some readers might want to examine more closely, but at the same time, keeps the length of the business plan itself manageable. So, dun sa mismong business plan, hindi mo ilalagay din lahat-lahat doon. So, kailangan concise yon and very, kung ano lang talaga yung kailangan. So, dun sa mga, sa tingin nyo is gusto pang malaman ng mga magbabasa ng business plan, so dito nyo yun ilalagay sa appendices. So, class, not all the time, the business plans will result into successful business undertaking. The chances of failure, though, are higher if the business plan is poorly prepared. Potential investors are likely to reject a business plan that has the following problems. So, ano-ano ba tong problems na to? First one is the document is sloppy and looks unprofessional. So, sino bang investor yung gaganahan mag-invest sa business proposal pa lang is very unprofessional na. And then, the executive summary is not coherent and is too long. So, sabi ko sa inyo, kailangan concise. And then, unclear why people would want to buy the product or service. And unclear whether the product can be readily produced. So, parang dun sa business plan, makikita na parang hindi naman possible yung pag-produce nung ganong product. And then, the sales and financial projections are unreasonably optimistic. So, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na hindi siya yung totoong clear representation or presentation ng possible na sales or yung mga financial projection mo. Para hindi siya yung tamang estimate. So, ganyan. And then, inadequate description of the qualification and experience of the management team. So, syempre, nabanggit yan natin na kailangan ilalagay mo talaga doon yung mga useful dun sa business na mga qualifications and experience ng management team. So, also, inadequate assessment of the potential threats to the business. So, threats is very important na ma-analyze mo para alam mo kung ano yung hakbang na gagawin mo. So, if inadequate yung assessment mo pa lang nun, so, it's likely possible na mag-fail talaga yung business plan. Next topic is how to present a business plan. So, the writing of the business plan is only the first step in getting its reader to act favorably. A well-written business plan might make a potential investor or lender more inclined to provide financing for the business. But an effective oral presentation is essential in closing the deal. So, ano kaya yung mga makakatulong sa pagpe-present natin ng business plan? We have here some guidelines that will help the entrepreneur when making the presentation. So, first one is tell a compelling story. So, we must always remember that the goal is to persuade and not to overwhelm your audience with facts and figures. So it means you must avoid tables and charts that are complex and that are difficult to make sense at a glance. So you must select the pieces of information that will best support your major points and avoid highly technical language as much as possible. So kailangan yung readily na maiintindihan and maa-appreciate nung pinagpepresentan mo. Next is exhibit confidence and professionalism. This can be achieved by preparing well and rehearsing the presentation several times so that you will be able to commit key points to memory and to present in a relaxed and natural manner. So, isa din ito talaga sa tinitignan, especially ng mga potential investor kasi dito mo makikita kung gaano kaalam ng entrepreneur yung business na gusto niyang itayo and kung gaano siya ka-confident or kung gaano niya napag-aralan yung ipe-present niya sa'yo. It is also important to cover the basics. So make sure that you set up your audiovisual equipment ahead of time so that you do not waste time trying to figure out how to show your slide presentation. In case the equipment malfunctions, be ready with several printed copies of your presentation that can be distributed to your audience. So, kailangan ready ka na din. So, hindi lang yung business plan, but kung paano mo siya ipe-present. So, if audiovisual ba yan, and then dapat lagi ding merong support na printed copy since hindi natin alam if biglang may malfunction na mangyari. So, you must be always ready. And lastly, you must adopt a cooperative attitude when answering questions. So do not be surprised if certain members of the audience ask tough and pointed questions. You are, after all, asking potential lenders or investors to provide a substantial amount of money for your proposed venture. If you show impatience or annoyance in answering their questions, this could signal a lack of emotional maturity on your part, which might not sit well with your audience. Try to answer the questions as best as you can, no matter how tough. So, dito din makikita nung potential investor mo kung gaano ka ba kaka-ready sa mga possible na ibato sa'yo. Kasi doon yun makikita, doon sa attitude kung paano mo sila sagutin pabalik. So, yun. So, be very matured and professional in answering the questions. So also, always be ready to deliver an elevator pitch in case you need to give one. So you might encounter a potential investor while attending a social event, while having coffee sa Starbucks, or you guessed it, while standing by the elevator. So this is a chance for you to make a 1 to 2 minute pitch of your idea, quick enough before the elevator ride is over. So your goal in this elevator pitch is to get the person interested about or about your business or be intrigued by your idea to make him want to learn more about it. So hopefully, you will get a response like, your idea sounds promising. Let us meet next week so that you can tell me more about it. So yun yung elevator pitch. Kasi hindi mo naman sure kung saan or kung gaano mo lang katagal na pwedeng masabi yun dun sa potential investor. So dapat you make the most of it. So dapat parang magiging interesting yung sasabihin mo na gugustuhin pa nung potential investor na mas makausap ka regarding dun sa business plan na gusto mo. So that ends our lesson for today. Pero hindi lang siya end, so it is also a start of you developing your own business plan. Up next, so we will be discussing about the recognition of the potential market. In order to understand more our topic for the day, so kindly do activity number 1 with your group mates. Note individual submission of the activity in Schoology. So the group group work, but you should submit in Schoology individually. So for our consultation, you can message me on Facebook, or you can message me or you can send me a message on my number. So from 5:50 to 6:50. So I hope you've learned something and nagkaroon kayo ng interest sa mga possible na mangyari pa dito sa subject natin na entrepreneurship. So thank you guys.